This is Look West, a podcast from California's Assembly Democrats.
Hi everyone, I'm Lauren Macias with Look West. I want to start by saying Happy Women's History Month. Did you know that women now hold 50 of the 120 seats in the state legislature? And more specifically, 26 out of the 62 Democratic Assembly members are women? It's true, the most recent Assembly class absolutely broke records. Dr.Jasmeet Bains, my hometown Assembly member, is also the first Sikh woman ever elected to the Assembly. There are also a total of 12 Latina Democratic Assemblymembers in office. As we celebrate these incredible women and other California women trailblazers, we stop by the Women's Caucus retreat and ask them if it's important to have even more women in the legislature.
It is important and it is inspiring. It's important because representation matters. If we're talking about representing women, women want to see that there are women that look like them representing them.
It's important and inspiring. It's important because we have another voice at the table, and a woman's voice always needs to be at the table with different perspectives. And it's inspiring because now we have more young ladies that can look up and they can see themselves in their leaders, and they can aspire to be more.
It's so inspiring. It's particularly to hear the stories of why it was so important that they were to join the legislature. I mean, there's stories about coming, that they were immigrants. There's stories about that they've been abused. There's been stories about their children. There's been stories about, their rural upbringings. So to bring all those people together and to hear their stories and to make sure that we have a diverse group at the legislature, this is the best thing we could have asked for.
It's incredibly important and inspiring that there's more women in the legislature, myself being one, because I'm the very first Democratic woman ever to represent San Luis Obispo County.
It's so great to see 50 women here in our 120 member legislature. We're not at parity. We want to get to 60 and beyond, and I think that it is incredibly important for women to have a voice in the state.
Absolutely, it's important. But important from the perspective that the way that women approach issues is very collaborative. So it's important to the process.
I think especially for young women coming up and wanting to engage civically, a lot of times they said you can't be it if you don't see it. And so now they get to see all these women doing amazing things in the legislature and have that as a goal for themselves.
Representation matters. People with diverse life experiences matter. I also think about it as a mom. I can count on one hand how many moms are in the legislature with young kids. I think that it's really critical that we have women in positions of power, women in elective office, women choosing to press the green or the red button as we make these decisions, because we bring a different life experience and a different perspective.
Having more women in the state legislative body is very important, because we know that when women are at the table, decisions are made in reference to not only women being mothers, but women being leaders.
Members of the caucus also shared how the vibe has shifted with more women around the assembly chambers.
Yeah, there's a lot more people saying, "Hey, sister, what's going on?" So there's a lot of collegiality right now. And again, we do have some differences within the group, but we respect each other, and we have to make sure that we don't lose sight of the respect that we owe each one of our members.
To be able to see another woman in the hallway, there's always a conversation. There's always a hug. It is a good vibe.
Women tend to be a little more collaborative. They come at it with an inquiry first, and then that forms the position, rather than, this is my position, let me have you disabuse me of it. I think women tend to come at it with a more inquisitive mind as they formulate their opinions.
There is a level of warmth that is there, and the conversation around women's rights and what it means to have families and how to protect families is definitely more prevalent, I believe, than it was before. And you see it how in the last, if you look at the legislation in the last 4 years compared to the 40 years before that, you see a difference, and women are making a difference, and I'm glad to be a part of that discussion.
Well, I think it's important. I look at, the biggest bill I did last year was AB 2011, a big housing bill. Mm-hmm. And my kind of co-pilot on that was Senator Caballero in the Senate. She had SB 6, and we worked very collaboratively together. We had different points of view, but we sat down and talked about it and thought it through and negotiated and came to an agreement on something that I think will help all Californians. And I think that's an example of, this is why I love the Women's Caucus, is because we really try to work together. And no offense to the gentlemen out there, but I think the women legislators have the ability really to kind of, sort of put our ego aside and figure out how we can actually work together to create the change we want to see.
As part of the episode, we went to the Women Inspire exhibit at the California Museum to interview one of the leading female voices in the legislature, Assemblymember Sabrina Cervantes. Before the interview, my colleague Alexis Manzanilla and I looked around.
This is March Fong Yu, the first Asian American Secretary of State, first Asian American woman to hold state office, and she had a particularly iconic moment where she smashed a toilet in front of the Capitol.
While she was in the assembly, she became famous for a campaign to ban paid toilets in public buildings. At that time, there were toilets that you could only use if you put 10 cents into a slot. March thought it was unfair because men could use urinals for free, but if a woman had to go, she needed to pay money first. So, she brought a toilet to the steps of the state capitol and she smashed it with a hammer.
Wow, so I think this story really inspires me because something as simple as going to the bathroom is something we take for granted. It's readily available anywhere, and kind of comparing, contrasting where we were back then, paying 10 cents to use the bathroom, and where we are now with Cristina Garcia's bill with offering free sanitary products in all women's bathrooms now. So I think March Fong Yu would be very proud of all the work that we're accomplishing, now in 2023.
Yeah, I think she really paved the way and kind of inspires us to look in all areas for where we need more progressive legislation, even when it comes to things like toilets and, as Lauren mentioned, sanitary products and stuff like that. And it kind of inspires us to always keep moving forward and that there's always progress to be made, even now. We are at part of the exhibit that has quite a few Latina leaders, including Dolores Huerta, who has been pretty involved in the state legislature here in California for quite some time. And she's a labor activist who devoted her life to improving the conditions for farm workers, worked along Cesar Chavez, and she's very inspirational. We have a nice portrait of her when she was younger, and she has a pin on her shirt that says "Don't buy grapes," part of the boycott back then. We have a UFW flag in front of us.
And something that it says right on top is challenge like. So it reads challenge like Dolores Huerta. And I think that this is a message to, the younger generation to continue challenging the normal, pushing these boundaries that are set for women all across the United States. In California, we are making strides, but there's always room for more improvement. We'll learn more about the museum a bit later when we catch up with the CEO of the California Museum, Amanda Meeker. But first, Assemblymember Cervantes joined us at the museum to talk about the record-setting women in the legislature, the impact that's having on policies and legislation, and who inspires her. We are sitting in the Women's Inspire exhibit at the California Museum, and on the walls around me are kind of the giants that I see you, me, my little sister sort of standing on. To my left right now is Dolores Huerta. Are exhibits like this important to you? How do they make you feel?
Personally, yes. So these exhibits are important. I think that they are inspiring as we look ahead to the challenges that are before us, because we know that every individual on this wall has faced their own set of challenges along their unique journeys. And so, looking at what they've overcome and how they've been successful in uplifting our communities is moving. It tells me that, in spite of the challenges, to stay the course and that we're on the right track.
And then can you share any personal role models that you have?
Coming from, I'm the daughter of farm workers. I'm the daughter of Mexican immigrants. And so my grandparents' stories, my mother's stories, those are really the spark in my life. Mm-hmm. And from leaders like Dolores Huerta, who I see here today on this wall, and just many other leaders, women figures who have played a vital role in my journey. to keep moving forward despite the challenges, to be resilient. And that's something that I think women are known to do, to keep moving forward no matter what. It's to fight for justice, because at the end of the day, our community needs our voices, needs our diverse experiences at the table when we're making key decisions on behalf of Californians.
So our goal for this episode is just highlighting all of the ways that the women are making a large impact in the caucus. And why is it important to have female and diverse leadership in the legislature?
Well, first off, we know that women account for half the people in California. And when we think about the success of our state, that includes elevating the voices and experiences of women, especially when we're trying to advance solutions to address the issues and disparities that women face. And so having our voices at the decision-making table are absolutely critical when we're talking about gender equity, when we're talking about access to childcare, maternal mental health, the pay equity gap. These are all issues of importance for at least the Women's Legislative Caucus, and issues that we've been working on for a number of years.
Beautifully said. And when you're doing all that work, that is, something that the caucus and the Women's Caucus has been striving for and moving forward with, what does it feel like to be part of the record-setting class of women in the Assembly?
So we have 50 members of the Legislative Women's Caucus, and it is not lost upon me the significance of this moment, and the moment that I get to serve and represent not just my district, but represent Californians, and doing so as the first Latina, millennial, openly LGBTQ member as well. And also to know, being the chair of the Latino Caucus, being the first LGBTQ woman to lead the Latino Legislative Caucus, and the largest in our history when it comes to members, which is 35. And so when we look at just all of the intersectionalities of all the women in the caucus, I think it's important to reflect on these moments and acknowledge where we're at, how we got here, and where we need to go. There are so many stories in my life and individuals who have sparked just that wanting to make a difference. They have been the spark in my life along my journey, and I know that that's the same for many of my colleagues in the Women's Caucus. And so we are going to continue focusing on parity in the legislature, to ensure that we are doing the very best that we can to elevate the voices of women and children in the state.
Being part of that record-setting class of women and the Latino Caucus, do you feel that there's a cultural shift in the Assembly chambers? Do legislative processes feel different with more women around?
So in my 6 years here, I have noticed a bit of a difference. When I first got to the legislature in 2016, I had no children, and here we are with triplets that are 3 years old. And so there definitely needed to be a little bit of a culture shift within the building, and thankfully, I've had a positive experience working with leadership and my colleagues to be able to navigate through this part of service that we are called to do while trying to find a balance with family, and work life. And so just, that's, there's more work that we need to do, clearly. That's not lost upon me. We need to make sure that we are continuing to move the needle so that we have more women who aren't afraid to step up and serve when they have young families, or whatever that dynamic looks like back home.
It kind of makes images that you see of Buffy Wicks chasing after her kids on the assembly floor during the swearing in, or Pilar Schiavo's daughter kind of taking the spotlight a little bit in their pictures. It's something that you don't really think is different or groundbreaking, but like it is. Like those photos didn't maybe exist, 20, 30 years ago.
Correct.
And so my next question for you, talking about, the future and the work that we need to do, can you share with us some of the Women Caucus priorities for 2023 and 2024?
So we have historically led on issues of childcare access. We've led on any issues that deal with women, children, and families. We have not set our legislative priorities and budget just yet. We're actually in conversation as we speak with the caucus to ensure that we have a path toward victory to get our bills through and get our budget requests through through both houses and onto the governor's desk. But I know that just given the history that we've had around equity, around child care, this is absolutely where we're going to continue focusing on. There's key pillars that we're highlighting still this legislative session.
And building on those promises that we're setting, I want to talk about the significance of the groundbreaking legislation of Proposition 1, which for some of our listeners, this basically enshrined reproductive rights into our state constitution. How do you think we're going to keep this momentum going?
Well, so this was a really big issue. I'm grateful for the voters of California and grateful to our legislature for leading on this issue. We know that we cannot stop here. We need to continue pushing forward until every state in our nation has access to reproductive freedom and contraception. Like I said, throughout this United States, as a mother of triplets by choice, it is a deeply personal decision on whether someone starts a family or not. And we know that given the actions that happened under Supreme Court, how that affected millions of birthing people across our nation. And so, when we come together recently, we just had a rally in downtown Riverside in my district where we had folks fired up from as young as 6 years old that were there to, other generations and ready to continue leading. We know that we're protected in California, but we know that there's so much more work to do and be that spark of hope for the rest of the nation.
And then the other part of that question is, how does the Assembly seek to continue introducing groundbreaking legislation this year?
As we always have, we don't rest on our laurels. We push hard, fight forward on issues of values where we come together on. We have aggressive agendas and policy areas, each house does, and I'm certainly eager to work with my colleagues to getting to issues that are going to deliver for the health, safety, and well-being of our communities. But that starts with having, just that vision and also being creative sometimes in how we get to see change, right? And sometimes it's incremental, but we have to continue to push forward, even if it's, we don't get all the way to the goalpost, but we're inching closer and closer every legislative session. And that's always, my goal is if we don't, score one year, we're going to come back the next year and we're going to keep pushing until we get closer and closer, until we get that bill signed, until we get, our budget priority through and being able to just secure resources for our most vulnerable.
And speaking of being creative, what do you anticipate as future challenges or obstacles that the caucus might face?
Well, I think really just our economic outlook. These next 2 years will probably be one of the most challenging when it comes to the budget, and that's less resources in critical areas that we're all fighting in. So many righteous issues that we, could continue to look at, but I certainly am concerned and just mindful of our economic outlook. And at the end of the day, we will do our very best to uplift the issues that we care most about.
And my last question here, do you believe the rest of the country is looking west to California when it comes to having more diverse legislative leadership?
Absolutely, absolutely. I hear it, being a part of different conferences and just being active in many different areas. I know that from firsthand experience, folks are looking at what California is doing, and that's it's exciting. At the same time, it means that we need to be bolder with our actions, and we need to step up to the plate and deliver.
Thank you to Assemblymember Sabrina Cervantes. Before we left the museum, the CEO, Amanda Meeker, stopped by. She sat down and talked with me and Alexis.
We're doing a whole podcast, as you know, for Women's History Month, highlighting the record-breaking class of women in the legislatures, particularly in the California Assembly. We just wanted to ask you about your thoughts on the significance of this exhibit and highlighting these important women in leadership roles.
Yeah, our exhibit, Women Inspire, California Women Changing Our World, focuses on so many women who have gone before us. So we look at this class in the legislature right now, and we're so proud of that. And then we can look back at the women on whose shoulders they stand right here in the museum.
And then just to paint a picture of where we're sitting right now, we're in a round room. On the wall it says, Women Lead, Innovate, Discover, Win, Create, Challenge. I see blue walls covered with inspirational women from even my lifetime, orange walls with women who've come before us, pink walls. Like, what does this exhibit mean to you? Like, why is it so important that we highlight these women that are pictured all around us versus highlighting inspirational men, let's say?
Well, inspirational men have their place as well, but they have had their place in museums for centuries, whereas women have not. So this exhibit that we have here, we worked on with first partner Jennifer Siebel Newsom, and it launched, it's probably been maybe 2 years now, but that was during the pandemic. And so, it's quite new. It is growing out of another exhibit that we had previously called California's Remarkable Women that we put together with former First Lady Maria Shriver. And when we put that exhibit together, there was nothing like this. There was nothing about California women in the state capitol. And it's just so important, I think, to see oneself, see people like oneself in a museum and see the things that we all can be.
Can we ask you what your favorite part of the exhibit is? Is there a special part to you where you really enjoy what's being highlighted, or it's just kind of your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very hard question, but I'd have to pick, I think, it's a tough one. I'm going to pick the Ray Eames exhibit. So Ray, often, if people don't know, people think she's a man because of her name, but she was a woman, and she and her husband, Charles Eames, came up with some of the most lasting designs in furniture and design. And if you see pictures of them, you'll absolutely recognize them. Classic furniture that's still in production today that they came up with in the 40s. And what we have here are some prototypes that she made for that furniture. So these are totally one-of-a-kind, unique pieces, tiny prototypes that she made that then evolved into the chairs that became ubiquitous across the world. And so I love having those here because they're so unusual and cute.
That's awesome. How have you seen the exhibit inspire visitors, particularly like young women? I know you were mentioning before that you have a lot of like younger classes coming in.
Yeah, we have every day this place gets full of children, and you see girls and boys, but you definitely see girls coming in, and they typically, it's kind of like what you were saying, that they gravitate toward the younger people in here whom they know, sort of in the modern section, and they go, oh, this is cool, I know this woman, and then they get drawn in to learn about others. Mm-hmm. And we're sitting right now in what we call the Hall of Inspiration, and so in here you're seeing women who are leading in these different fields, all of which can be followed. And if you watch the videos in here, they're all, well, not all, but most of them are narrated by children and young people, looking at, how they get inspired by other women.
Piggybacking on Alexis's question and, the younger generation, I remember visiting museums when I was a child, and kind of to my question earlier, it was filled with a bunch of men, and I would see people that looked like my dad, maybe, but I didn't really see anyone that looked like me, and there was no space that highlighted, quite frankly, all the incredible work women offer to our spaces and, whatnots. But looking forward, how do we see exhibits like this progressing?
Well, that's a good question. We're always on to something else here, and I hadn't quite gotten there yet, but I think where we be going in the future is to make things more immersive and more, we have a lot of interactivity here, but you can never have sort of enough of that. And then I hope also, so we, at the, just outside here to the right, we have a section about not equal yet. And it's looking at, we have made so much progress as women toward equality, but we all know, we're not equal yet, and there's still, gaps in pay and gaps in treatment. And I would like to see that wall updated with some, when we get there to equality, and I hope it's soon.
Could you give us some more information about when the museum is open?
Yeah, so the California Museum, we are open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 5, and Sunday, noon to 5. We're located downtown, just a block from the historic state capitol. And besides the remarkable women exhibit that we're in right now, we have many other exhibits, including changing exhibits. So every time you come here, you're going to see something new, but you're always going to see women front and center here at the California Museum.
Thank you again to Amanda Meeker. I really encourage anyone listening to visit this incredible exhibit at the museum. This was my first time visiting, and it was a truly inspiring feeling to be surrounded by all of these incredibly impactful women. Thanks to Majority Leader Eloise Gomez-Reyes, Women's Caucus Vice Chair Cecilia Aguirre-Curry, Assembly members Dawn Addis, Gail Pellerin, Sharon Quirk-Silva, Buffy Wicks, Lori Wilson, Diane Pappin, and Blanca Pacheco for talking with us at the retreat. I'm Lauren Macias for Alexis Manzanilla and Look West. Happy Women's History Month, and thank you for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.
The Look West podcast is produced by California Assembly Democrats. When you think of Californian politics, remember to look west.